I'm very happy to be with you today to talk about the subject of contentment and simplicity. Particularly, our theme is simplicity today, contentment being the means whereby we might get there. And so let me just go through some scriptures with you to show you why this is such an important theme, very important theme in this particular moment in which we find ourselves in history, in the midst of a viral crisis in the world that's created an economic downturn. So let's look at this. In Proverbs chapter 30, this beautiful wise word says this. The writer says this: God, I ask two things of you before I die. Number one, give me neither poverty. Number two, nor riches. I love that. Feed me with the food that is my portion. That way I won't be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Nor will I be in want and steal and profane the name of my God. And so there's this middle path between poverty and riches that seems to be some kind of an ideal that God is after for us, whereby we're not storing up wealth endlessly and developing this sense of autonomy so that we no longer need God or one another. Neither are we living in a continual sense of poverty. Of course, the world in which we live right now is dividing precisely here. Millions and billions amassing more wealth, but really still a minority, while the vast majority of the world is plunged deeper and deeper into poverty. We're looking for this third way. And this third way is good for people, good for the earth, and good for generosity. It's good for people because we're told in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9, that the love of money is the root of all evil, and people, many, it says, by desiring to acquire more and more and more, have plunged themselves into ruin. We all know people who have amassed great wealth, but have no sense of contentment or happiness, and even have acquired a lot of physical troubles in terms of hypertension and blood pressure, and kind of this continual sense of living life in a pressure cooker because we need more and more and more. Not just more stuff, but underlying the pursuit of more is more commitments and more relationships. And this endless desire for more is addressed by Paul in his letter to Timothy when he says, hey, look, if you have food and shelter, be content. So it's good for people to find this third way between wealth and poverty. It's good for the earth because when I take you to the prophet Hosea, he says this: listen to the word of the Lord, O Israel. The Lord has a case against you because there's not faithfulness or kindness or knowledge of God in the land. And then he goes on and says this: there's swearing, there's deception, there's murder and stealing and adultery, there's violence, bloodshed follows bloodshed. And then very powerfully and profoundly it says this: therefore the land itself mourns. When we take more and more from the earth without giving back because of a false understanding of dominion in Genesis 1, our lust to take more and more eventually comes back to bite us. And we see it in climate change and the increased carbon dioxide level. We see it in the depletion of the soil. We see it in many ways. Simplicity, cutting back our consumption, being content with what God gives us, is not just good for people, it's good for the earth. Then it's good for generosity because, of course, it says in Proverbs 22, verse 9, that a rich man will be blessed if he gives generously. I'm richly blessed, not by being rich. I'm richly blessed by living generously, by giving away what God has given to me. And so it's beautiful to see ourselves as these containers continually receiving the blessing of God so that we may then turn around and give that blessing to others. Good for people, good for the earth, good for generosity. Now, the source of this simplicity is contentment. And I've already addressed it a little bit, but in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 8, we're told that our invitation is to be content simply with food and shelter. And if we are content with what is on our plate, that becomes for us a headwaters of our capacity to live the life that God has created for us, a life of generosity and hope and mercy and, yes, simplicity. But I will never know simplicity until I can enjoy contentment. And so then I kind of ask the question, okay, if I'm called to contentment, how do I develop this spirit of contentment? And the answer is found in what I believe to be the headwaters of contentment. And then contentment leads to simplicity. And the headwaters are twofold, basically. Number one, I need to open my eyes and be aware of the goodness and beauty and abundance that is all around me in any situation. Most of us watching this video can see this abundance if we just open our eyes. A tasteful cup of coffee, a good meal, face-to-face contact with friends. These are gifts that God has given us. And if we begin to pay attention to the gifts and receive them as gifts, not rights, then that awareness leads to gratitude. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17 is where Paul says, listen, in everything give thanks. I think a beautiful example of gratitude stemming from awareness can be found in Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the pastor who was imprisoned in Germany during World War II. In his letters from prison, which ultimately became a book, Bonhoeffer said, there's a lot I could complain about, but now I'm paraphrasing a bit, and he said this, instead of complaining, I look out my window and I see the clouds and I give thanks for the clouds. And I hear a bird singing and I give thanks for the bird singing. And I actually see even an insect in my cell and I befriend that insect and give thanks for all the life that God has created. Because in the midst of uncertainty, in the midst of oppression, in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of kind of a future that is a complete fog, I can still give thanks for what is on my plate today. So awareness of what is on my plate, gratitude for what is on my plate, is the way to contentment. And then that sense of contentment leads to a life of simplicity. I can be fully present in conversations. I can be listening to you rather than, as I'm listening, thinking quickly about what I'm going to say. I can be present. That's the calling that God has for us. The way we get there is to begin the practice of particularly two spiritual disciplines, I would say. The practice of gratitude and the practice of release. Gratitude simply means this, doing what Bonhoeffer did, seeing and giving thanks. I keep a journal and I try every day to write in that journal one thing for which I'm thankful for on that day. Sometimes it's a conversation, sometimes it's food, sometimes it's sunshine, sometimes it's the health that I'm blessed with. But whatever it is, if I develop a habit of gratitude, that leads to contentment and simplicity. And then, finally, I have to practice as well release. Jesus released everything, leaving his status with God in heaven and becoming a man. And we're told in Philippians chapter 2 to have this attitude in us that was also in Christ. So what can I give away to those who need? What food can I give away? What financial resources can I give away? What possessions can I give away? What time can I give away? What word of encouragement can I give away? I try not to just practice gratitude every day, but every day I'd love to say I was able to give something away because freely, this is what Jesus said, freely you have received, freely give. We're called, friends, to a life of simplicity. And simplicity requires contentment, and contentment comes from awareness and gratitude, and the practices of gratitude and giving away will take you there. I hope you'll begin to put these things into practice in your own life so that you too might enjoy in increasing measure the simplicity and contentment that comes from Christ. Thank you very much. See you next time.